morning. Welcome to the Regional School Committee meeting for Tuesday, October 7th, 2025. It is now 6:31 p.m. We're going to start our meeting. This meeting is being conducted in person, and we do have Zoom open for those wishing to make community comments. So with that being said, we'll get started. Is there anyone on for community comments at the moment? No?
Or in person.
No?
Or in person.
Oh, or in person? No one wants to. All right, with that being said, we will move on. We're going to start with our student council representatives.
Okay, Evelyn Paul is here tonight.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Evelyn. I am the Student Council School Committee rep this year, so you'll be seeing a lot more of me. So I'm just going to give you like a quick overview of what Student Council wants to do this year, and obviously as some of these dates come closer, I'll give more details, but I'll just give you like a blurb. In the past, our open house went very well. There were a lot of ushers. I was one of the ushers. It was very good. There was like a club fair, and it all went very well. And then for Halloween, we are going to be having a Halloween costume contest. We're really going to try to encourage like student participation with prizes, because who doesn't love prizes? And around November break, Thanksgiving, we want to do Spirit Week. Again, we want to encourage lots of participation with prizes. And Wednesday, which is like a half day before Thanksgiving, there's going to be an assembly, chorus, band. Spirit Week winners will all be announced there. And December 4th, we want to do the town meeting survey again, but this time we'd like to host it in person. We've been doing it virtually via survey, but surveys don't really go well with the students here, so we'd love to host it in person this year. In March of 2026, we are going to be hosting our annual blood drive, which goes very well. Students are very eager to donate their blood. And finally, to end off the year, we have our teachers' staff appreciation assembly, where we commemorate teachers that are retiring, and we welcome teachers that are we commemorate teachers who have if it's their first year, we want to and then finally graduation, student ushers. Yes, so that's all.
Thank you. Any questions for Evelyn? Thank you all for ushering on back to school night. I'm the parent who always gets lost in the glass hallway. It's like Alice in Wonderland. I go down it and I never know where I'm going to end up.
Yeah, it does take some good
Yes, it does. And several of your ushers directed me and said, no, you're going the completely wrong way. So thank you. All right, anybody else? No?
All right,
Thank you.
Evelyn.
Yeah. Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your night.
Yes. All right, next we'll move to Superintendent McCoy for superintendent comments.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. So as Evelyn touched upon, we've had both our middle and high school open houses on September 11th and September 18th. They were both huge successes. Lots of parents and guardians here, lots of help from our students. And just a reminder, I got to be there wearing two hats, and just a reminder, how much effort goes into it on the part of our educators to explain their curriculum and talk about their expectations. And it gives you a flavor for each of the classes that our children get to attend every day. On September 26th, we had our first game on the turf. So exciting. Our football team played Weston. But the highlight, not only getting to see the kids and the community come together, is we got to thank all of the donors. So, of course, the taxpayers in Dover-Sherborn who provided for the turf and the track. And for those of you who got all the voters out to make that happen, thank you. And we also got to appreciate the Mudge Foundation, DSC TV, the boosters for their support of the bleachers and the press box, and then K Array USA is owned by a parent, Rusty Waite, who donated the new speaker system, which is fabulous. So if you haven't been to a game yet on the field, I highly encourage it. The blue track looks amazing, especially now that the white lines have been painted. It pops. It just looks really incredible. And then speaking of sports, I happened to be at a Patriots game looking at the field after having just been on our field, and I think our field actually looks better than Gillette right there. But if you do like Gillette, both our girls and boys soccer teams will be playing there next Thursday night, so you're welcome to come out and support them. Other than that, we continue to roll along with our school year. Our educators and our leaders are setting their goals for the year. As you know, I set mine in September, and now that will trickle down to the building and the classroom goals. We also had our first emergency response team meeting as a leadership team, so that's when all of our district and school leaders come together. We met with our police chiefs, Galvin and Vinci, and our fire chiefs, our new fire chief from Dover, Chief Smith, and Chief Ward from Sherborn, and we really just talk about the drills that we have, either have already done, such as the fire drills and the bus evacuation drills, or the drills that we're planning, such as lockdown drills and shelters in place, and recruit them to help train our new staff, which was done in August, but also run refreshers for our staff before we actually do the drills with the kids. We talk about any items or systems that need tweaking or updates, and then get updates from them from the field of things that they're learning from their counterparts across the country. That said, both parents from Pine Hill and Chickering have requested, given everything happening in our world, if we can do a refresher for them about the drills that we run with students and with staff, the protocols and safety mechanisms we have in place. So we're currently working with our chiefs to schedule times where we will provide an update for parents. We'll make it a hybrid option, so people who want to come in person can, or people who want to Zoom in can do that as well, and then we'll have kind of a memo afterwards for people who weren't able to make it. So stay tuned for that, because we'll do one for Chickering, one for Pine Hill, and then one for the region, because each one functions a little bit differently in regard to safety. Negotiations, the school committee negotiation team is off and running. Thanks to Jeff and Mary for sitting on that team. We had a meeting last Wednesday where we named Jeff the chair of the committee.
Very happy about it.
Congratulations. Thank you.
And we have a second meeting of the school committee side next Wednesday, and we'll have our first meeting with the DSEA on October 29th. So the ball is rolling, and we're excited to work with all of our units this year to make sure that they have a fair and supportive contract. Other than that, the big highlight from coming out of September are that our MCAS results have been shared publicly. So Assistant Superintendent Conklin's going to dive into some data for us.
All right, everyone. It's the presentation you've been looking forward to all year long. All right. So, looking at our MCAS results, these were actually just released publicly last Monday. So these are kind of hot off the presses. So this will give you an update on where we stand at the region from last year's administration of the MCAS exams. I have some handouts that will just be good references as we go through, because sometimes all the different names and abbreviations can get confusing, so this will just help us as we're going through them. So every year I start with this quote from John Hattie, who talks about the purpose of assessments. And he says, the major purpose of assessment in schools should be to provide interpretive information to teachers and school leaders about their impact on students, so that these educators have the best information about what steps to take with instruction and how they need to change and adapt. So the MCAS is one of many different types of assessments and data that we collect from students. So you can see that at the bottom of our pyramid of all of the data, all of the assessments, we have the things that we take from students on a daily or weekly basis: an exit ticket at the end of the lesson, student self-reflection, teacher check-in during a lesson. These are the things that are ongoing, sometimes multiple times a day at the elementary level. 1 to 4 times a month, we have common assessments. Who might have a math problem of the week, some written work samples, science journals. Things that happen quarterly or at the end of the unit are summative assessments, so tests, quizzes, and projects. 2 to 3 times a year, we have our benchmarks, so our diagnostic tools like IXL, the PSI phonics screener, our DIBELS, our math screener that we give. We do our Panorama SEL, and obviously at the high school we have midterms and final exams. And then we have things that only happen once a year, MCAS being one of them, our AP exams, our SATs, and for our multilingual learners, the Access test that happens in January to measure their English language proficiency. So the MCAS is one small piece of a much larger pyramid of data and all these different signals that we get, all this information that teachers use to make decisions about how they alter instruction and how they work with their students over the course of the year. So the MCAS isn't the be-all, end-all, but when we take a look at it with all of these other things together, it can really help shed light on places that we might want to adapt or change or shift as we're going through the year. So overall, the state landscape, so this is information that we got on a call with the new commissioner. So overall, across Massachusetts, these were the general trends. So in grades 3 through 8, there was about a 3% increase in ELA scores. So that's in the percentage of students who either met or exceeded expectations. And there was no change really in math. Math stayed level at the state level. Looking at grade 10, overall, ELA decreased by about 6%, and math decreased by about 3%. Science, no real changes in grade 5, and then there are some slight decreases in grades 8 and grades 10. So this is just things to keep in mind as you're thinking about the overall trends in the state and then how our Dover-Sherborn students did. Another thing that they talked about on this call with the commissioner was the impact of question 2, which got rid of the MCAS as the competency determination, and whether or not they saw any impacts of that on last year's MCAS results. That should be an increase. Sorry, there's a typo there. But there was an increase in blank responses on some of the exams, specifically in ELA, where they saw more students leaving the essay completely blank. So when you think about it, I guess if you're a student that is going through all these exams, that is the thing that requires a lot of work and a lot of input. So they saw more students leaving the essay blank, but they didn't see any decreases in overall participation rates across the state. And I have to say that, and we'll get to this in the data at the high school, we saw quite the opposite, actually, in our ELA results. So when we do think about our competency determination and graduation requirements, I know that there has been some concern about if you remove the MCAS as a graduation requirement, will students still take it as seriously? I think our data is showing that, yes, our students didn't change the way they thought about the exam. But we'll talk about that a little later. So that's the overall state landscape. So when this data comes in, what I tried to do is give a look behind the scenes at the things that we look at, and then define some of these terms so that as we go through the data, you'll have a reference for what they are all referring to. So one of the things that we look at is just achievement. Achievement is the score that a student gets on the MCAS. You can compare these across the years. Basically what the score is doing is measuring how students are doing against the Massachusetts frameworks in ELA, science, or math. And these usually stay pretty steady across the years. You don't see huge swings in our students' average scores. Then another thing we look at is the percent of meeting and exceeding expectations on the MCAS. DESE sets these ranges. They usually don't change. The only time these ranges that you can see in that chart below shift is if there's some huge jolt in the exam. So maybe the format changes dramatically. Back in the day when they moved from the MCAS to the next generation MCAS, they changed these ranges around. But for the most part, these ranges stay the same every year. So you can see the ranges in scores for not meeting expectations, partially meeting expectations, and exceeding expectations. So we tend to look at these scores in two ways. One of them is comparing one grade to how the grade did that previous year. So for example, how did this year's third graders do versus last year's third graders, that kind of grade by grade comparison. Another thing, and we have the luxury of doing this because we're such a small school system, is that we look at students who are kind of on the bubble. Specifically, our students that are in the partially meeting expectations, who might have just been a point or two away from getting into that meeting expectations category. Oftentimes, teachers will go in and they'll look at the student's entire item analysis to kind of see how close they were, what are the things that could have kind of pushed them over the edge. When we're thinking about these percentages, DESE considers meaningful change to be anything plus or minus 2%. So that's another thing to keep in mind as we go through the results. If you see kind of minus 1%, DESE kind of considers that a little bit more negligible, not impactful. So that tells part of the story, these scores, these numbers, and then these bands of categories here. The other thing that we look at, though, is student growth, and that's in something that is called an SGP, the Student Growth Percentile. What this does is it measures how a student did relative to how they did the previous year. So you're looking to see, did a student do better in math this year than they had in their past year? So this is the thing that is going to show each individual student what their growth was. DESE considers 50, an SGP of 50 to be average growth, and they consider anything 60 and higher to be higher than average SGP. So again, you can keep that in mind as we're going through the specific data for the schools. We look at cohort growth as well. So how did students progress as a cohort as they were going through all the various grades? So at the middle school, for example, if students did a certain way in 6th grade ELA, we're looking for when they get to 7th grade ELA for them to improve upon their previous year. So we're kind of tracking the grades and the groups of students as they're going through to make sure that we're seeing improvements. And then finally, we look at the item analysis. DESE reports these kind of big bucket domains within a content area. So for example, in math, there are 4 major domains: geometry, statistics and probability, numbers and quantity, and then algebra and functions. So we take a look at how students did in those overall domains. We then can dive even deeper and break it down into the connection between each question and the standard and the Massachusetts frameworks. And then another thing that our teachers usually look at is the differential between Dover-Sherborn and the state. So how did our students do on a question about photosynthesis versus how did students across the state do it? Usually we're looking for like a 20 to 30% difference between how we did and how we did across the state. We also look at this as a comparison between year to year. And then finally, we continue to break down the data even further into our subgroups. The specific subgroups that we pay attention to are high need students. That's a very broad category that actually includes all of these other categories after it. So the high needs is the big umbrella category. Underneath it are our multilingual learners, our low income students, our students with disabilities, and then a breakdown of students by race. Specifically in our Student Opportunity Act application, we cited our African American and our Black students as a subgroup that we really want to look at closing achievement gaps with. You won't see any numbers on the multilingual learners in this presentation because there's so few of them, and when you have such a small subset, DESE doesn't usually report on that to protect kind of confidentiality and student privacy. So you won't see those identified in the presentation. So we'll start with the middle school and then work our way up to the high school. So we'll start with ELA in grades 6 through 8. So in these charts, you'll be able to see how Dover-Sherborn students did last year in that gray column. In the blue column, you'll see how they did this year, and then you'll see the comparison to the state. That says 2024, but it should be 2025. So you can see that we had 71% of our 6th, 7th, and 8th graders were meeting or exceeding expectations. That was up from 2% over the previous year, 28% higher than the state average. The scaled score went down a point from last year, the average scaled score, so things stayed largely the same. And you can see our average SGP, that student growth percentile that you really want to see something 50 or above on, was 52.2. Which was pretty much level with the previous year. So overall, ELA, we had more students that were getting meeting and exceeding, and we saw very healthy growth from year to year for these students.
Any quick question on that? So this is all 3 grades combined, and then I know we bucket meeting or exceeding, but it seems like a pretty big drop in exceeding. Like, do you guys look into that? Like how you break that down? Because bucketing and meeting or exceeding, it's great. We went up by 1%, but so that we brought somebody up from partially meeting, but we also dropped 5 percentage points into just meeting.
Yep. So that's something that we can sort in the kind of software that we have called Open Architects. We can look at all the students that were in exceeding from one year and see where they were the year before. So we can see where they went basically from the year before, if they went up or they went down. Then we have conversations about students who had scores that significantly might have decreased from the year before, or if they saw a change from 7th grade to 8th grade and they were meeting one year and exceeding the other way or backwards. We kind of look at what those differentials look like.
And it's also more challenging because it's bucketed 6, 7, and 8, so you're dropping one group and you're adding an entirely different cohort.
Yep.
So one of those might pull it the other way too.
Yep. So looking at math now, so again, good results here. We were at 72% meeting and exceeding. That was up 1% from the previous year, 33% above the state average. Our average scaled score was 513, which was level from the previous year. SGP, again, 53.3, above 50, so that we're seeing students making the growth that we would expect them to be making. Science only happens in grade 8, so you can see that we were 72% meeting and exceeding. That was down 8% from the previous year. You can see that the average scaled score also went down a little bit, 5 points from the previous year. So that's something that we can talk about when we get to kind of our next steps and how we're going to look at and interpret some of these scores. But despite going down 8%, we were still 35% above the state average. Then finally, this is very exciting for me as a former history teacher. Last year was the first year that they had the civics MCAS exam given across the state. You might have read headlines about it in the Boston Globe that were saying that students did terrible on this throughout the state. So overall, across the state, there was 39% of students were either meeting or exceeding. And lucky for us in Dover-Sherborn, we were at 70% of students meeting or exceeding. So 31% above the state average, or the average scaled score is 510, which is about 5 points higher than the state average. So it was the first year that 8th graders took this across the state. It was not factored into our school's accountability level, which I'll talk about in a little bit, because it was a new test. And I think this is a really good result for us, specifically because it was really our first year going through the whole Massachusetts civics curriculum. So our teachers have been teaching more of a hybrid of civics and U.S. History 1 in 8th grade, and last year was the first year where they really went full tilt all civics. So I think this is a really successful result for that first year going through the curriculum. And then finally, DESE, based on these MCAS results, gives us an accountability rating. So there are two measures here. One is looking at the targets that DESE sets for our students in showing a certain amount of progress. So you can see that we were at 74% meeting or exceeding our targets. How this number is calculated is it takes 40% of how our students did in 2024, so it weights that 40%. Then it weights at 60% of how students did in 2025, and that's how you arrive at that final percentage. So it's a criterion reference target percentage, represents a weighted average of the annual criterion reference target percentages. So again, every year DESE sets specific targets for every school throughout Massachusetts. So we were at 74% of meeting those targets. The year before we were at 81%. The other accountability number that we get is a percentile. So we were in the 91st percentile. So that compares us to every 6 through 8 school in Massachusetts. And so we were in the 91 percentile. The caveat on that is it's 6 through 8 schools. So if you're a K through 8 school, for example, that's not going to compare us against them. If you are a 5 through 8 school, if you are any other configuration, it only compares you to the other specific schools that are like you. So that was good. We went up 1 percentile from 2024, 91 in the 91 percentile.
So Denny, on that first bullet, so that is DESE putting sort of the gauntlet down, like, hey, here's what you guys scored this year. We would like you to target that plus this, and so every school has an individual expectation of where they land.
Yep.
And so
raising the expectation.
And so, but we dropped comparatively to where their expectations were. We were at 74% versus we've been at 81% before.
Yep. I'll explain that in a moment.
Okay.
But yes, you're right in making that observation.
Complicated.
Yep. There's a lot of stuff that goes into that 74%. So it's going to look at the math, ELA, and science scores for all students. Then it's going to look at all of your subgroups and show if you're making adequate progress on each of those subgroups, and it awards a specific amount of points based upon how you've done in all those different categories, and then calculates it into a percentage. So it's a bit complicated. Eventually, this whole thing will be published on the DESE website, so you can go see the whole breakdown. But there are a lot of things that go into this. The number of students that participate in it is factored in. So if you have a low participation rate, that might hurt how you do on this. Chronic absenteeism can push down your accountability scores. So a lot of different factors that are part of that.
Okay, thanks.
So what are our successes at Dover-Sherborn Middle School? Our students continue to exceed the state averages by wide margins. We continue to think about how we were doing before the pandemic. This year, our 7th grade ELA and math scores, as well as our 8th grade math percentages of meeting and exceeding, were equal to or higher than before COVID. So that's showing some strong rebounds for 7th grade and 8th grade in math before COVID. When we break down ELA a little further, the two strongest domains for students were in reading and language. 7th grade scores went up in all 4 of those domains. When we think of 8th grade as a cohort, they went up 13% from where they were in 7th grade. So that means that 13% more students were meeting and exceeding in 8th grade than they were in 7th grade. So we want to see students continuing to improve as they progress throughout the grades. 7th grade as a cohort went up 7% from where they were in 6th grade. And 6th grade remained steady in ELA from where they were in 5th grade. And we saw all of our subgroups, so that I mentioned before, that includes our low-income students, our students with disabilities, and our Black and African American students, all had increases in the amount of students that met or exceeded expectations, and all had increases in their SGPs. So overall, very good news for ELA. With math, in math, ratios and proportions was our strongest domain. Every now and then you see something when you're going through the item analysis that strikes you. So in 6th grade, we saw a 20% increase in the amount of questions students got correct in statistics and probability. So I talked to our math curriculum leader, and she was just noting that they tried to infuse some statistics and probability games in throughout the whole year rather than just do it in one unit. So that's just an interesting thing to note. And the way that our teachers make changes when they're looking through this information. Our 7th grade went up as a cohort 7% from when they were in 6th grade. In science, you saw that overall our scores went down. When you look at the component scores, our physical science scores increased by 10%. And that makes sense because 8th grade is where we're doing the most physical science right now. And our students with disabilities saw a 10% increase in the percent of students that were meeting or exceeding. And again, we did very well, I think, in our civics for the first year of the exam and in the curriculum. So our focus areas, so you can see that, and this relates to what you were mentioning, Jeff, our subgroup data, when we look at our students with disabilities, our low-income students, our high-need students, and our Black and African American students, we can see that they need additional support in math. So the growth that these subgroups saw in math is one of the reasons why you saw that 74% compared to last year's 81%. Our ELA item analysis suggests that students need more support in writing, so both producing writing, the essay portion, and analyzing writing. So when they're looking at text and they're trying to analyze what is the author's tone, what was the purpose that the author had for writing something. Our math item analysis suggests that students need more support in geometry. This is consistent with our elementary scores as well. That's the category traditionally at the elementary level where students have kind of the lowest domain score in. So looking for ways to increase what we're doing in geometry. And you saw that kind of overall our science scores went down around 8%. It can be tricky with the way that we currently sequence science at the middle school level. Because right now we have what is referred to as a layer cake approach to science. So in 6th grade they do, please tell me I'm getting this right, 6th grade they do life science, earth science. 7th grade they do life science, and then 8th grade they do physical science.
I only know that because I'm a former middle school science teacher.
The 8th grade MCAS tests all 3 of those areas. So our students right now currently have to review what they did in 6th and 7th grade for the MCAS in 8th grade. So one of the things that we're going to discuss with the science department is looking for ways to integrate specifically the earth and space science and life science into the 8th grade in natural ways throughout the year. We certainly don't want our teachers taking 3 weeks to review for a test, but we do want to look for some natural ways to integrate those content areas throughout 8th grade to make connections so that students are revisiting those. So that's kind of something that we want to focus on in science this year. Obviously, a lot of these things are connected to our ongoing district improvement efforts. So we continue to have all of our data organized in Open Architects, and we have access for all admin, teachers, and support staff to see and to analyze, to kind of slice and dice the data. We have our MTSS dashboard, just showing students who are engaging in academic interventions. So we've been able to now track those interventions and those groups of students in a more organized way. And as Superintendent McCoy mentioned when she was going through her goals at the beginning of the year, one of our district goals is to convene a K-12 district data team this year to look at these overall vertical data trends. I think certainly subgroup data is something that we want to look at a little bit more in depth. We're continuing to build structures to support students. So last year was the first year at the middle school level that we had the win block for our students where they were getting those targeted interventions in ELA and math. This year we're continuing to offer interventions in science and executive functioning. We're also offering more enrichment opportunities in win blocks as well. So there were some groups of students last year that wanted to do some writing enrichment. So we have some opportunities for them to get those enrichment opportunities and win this year. And we're continuing to progress monitor and track all that data. In terms of science, this is going to come in front of you at some point this year, but we are going to be reorganizing the middle school science curriculum. So it's going to be an integrated approach. So rather than do those separate topics on each year, they're going to do a little bit of everything in each year. So that will hopefully roll out next fall in 6th grade and then kind of roll up every year after that. And one of the things that I'm very excited about is that our ELA teachers, our social studies teachers, and our science teachers met over the summer to come up with common terminology and posters about writing skills. So now the acronym CER, Claim, Evidence, Reasoning, is going to be used consistently across ELA, social studies, and science. So it's less confusing for students if they're hearing thesis in one class and claim in another class. All 3 of these content areas got on board. They printed the posters. They're in all the classrooms. So we're hoping that idea of being able to transfer those skills and students seeing how writing can look the same in those 3 content areas will be helpful and build that area in ELA that sometimes our scores are a little lower in, which is the writing piece. Yep, Jeff?
Just a question on are we doing the science switch up specifically because of the MCAS, or is there like best practices that we found like students learn better that way?
No, I would say that is what a lot of the research is showing right now, is that that's a better approach. I would say the innovative pieces of science right now are around phenomenon-based science. So you have curriculum like Open SciEd, which is focusing on looking at one specific topic for longer periods of time, but looking at it from various different angles and various different kind of lenses of the different sciences. And again, when we kind of present this to the school committee, we'll show kind of our comparable districts that have this model and some of the additional research that kind of supports potentially making this shift in science. But yeah, not just MCAS. We think it will help with MCAS. We also think it'll help with 9th grade biology MCAS. Because a lot of times in 9th grade, our students struggle on some of the genetics questions. So by kind of integrating this, the genetics will actually now move to 8th grade. So students will have it more recently when they take the 9th grade biology MCAS. So we're hoping to reap some benefits on the MCAS, but it's not the sole reason for making the shift.
Oh, thank you. And just, sorry, one other question on the MCAS results. Obviously, we cherry picked. We're doing better in some areas versus pre-COVID. Mm-hmm. Are there like particular standouts that we're worried about? That like there's certain cohorts. Like I didn't see 6th grade up there frequently. Like are they more worried about the 6th grade being like substantially behind where they were previous to COVID, or is there some commonality between them?
In terms of the sixth grade, there just weren't like huge swings either way. When we think about the subgroups, and this is something that we'll talk about the high school, what you have is you have the kind of larger group of students going up, and you have our subgroups going up, but the gap, they're both going up, but the gap is still persisting in between how they're doing. So while we're seeing progress in our subgroups and our non-subgroups, the fact that we're not closing that, they should kind of be going in towards each other versus just continuing to have that space in between them. That's the piece that we're trying to look at with the subgroups.
How are we compared to other districts?
In terms of subgroups?
Yeah.
I actually have not looked at that data yet because they haven't populated all of that data into our open architects. But that's certainly something I can give an update on later on. That requires open architects to take all of the data throughout the entire state and throw it in, and they just haven't done that yet since it only got released last Monday. But I can provide an update on that.
All right.
Get it.
Thank you.
Are we going into high school next?
We are, but
I was gonna say, like, we were in masks like 5 years ago. So these kids who were in sixth grade would have been in kindergarten, so they really wouldn't have had an ELA curriculum.
Mhm.
So it's like 2020. So 2021, we adopted units of study.
Mhm.
So probably 22, 23, we realized it was a problem. So the good news is these students could be the product of phonetic and phonemic supplementation of a curriculum that was suboptimal. So that's encouraging for me to see.
Mhm.
And then we're still on where's the curriculum for the elementary school stand? Are they still search with proposal coming in January, February?
Yep, so we have now reviewed, so we've set the criteria for what we want the program to look like at the elementary level, and over the summer, teachers looked at units of study compared to that criteria. So we're about to have we're about to have a decision about whether or not we move forward with units of study, or if we keep it and revise it.
Great.
That's ongoing. That should be within the next month or so.
And just speaking as a member of the community, I think that I did see changes in the elementary schools for for students of with reading disabilities, all those resources that were flexing. I do think you're seeing some of the repercussions of those positive influences. So that's good to see the ELA improving.
So we're going to move on to the high school. That's one school down, one to go. So looking at the high school, our 10th graders, and in science, our 9th graders. So this is ELA in grade 10. This is great data for ELA. You want to keep in mind that overall across the state, our 10th graders in ELA went down 6%, and we went up 7% from last year. 93% of our students were meeting or exceeding expectations in 10th grade ELA. I don't throw these things out there all the time, but that was the best in the whole state. So huge props to our students and huge props to our English department teachers who are working really, really hard with our students. They have spent the past couple of years and this year focusing on writing and how they can give more effective feedback to students. So again, I feel like we're seeing the results of the hard work that they've been putting in. So it's interesting too when you look at the numbers. We had this wonderful number for students that are meeting and exceeding, and then you can see our scaled score went down 1 point, but still 522 is a high score. And then our average SGP was 68.4. So again, anything that is 50 is average, anything that's 60 is above average. So 68.4 is showing a huge amount of growth for all of our students in ELA. So that went up 12 points from the previous year, which is 18 points above the state average. So very good news for ELA. In math, where across the state we saw minor decreases, we were level. So 89% of our students were meeting and exceeding. Our average scaled score stayed exactly the same, but look at our wonderful SGP. So 71, that was up from 7 points from the previous year and 21 points above the state average. So again, not only are our students doing well and meeting and exceeding, but they're showing a large amount of growth from when they last took the MCAS in the 8th grade. Then when you look at 9th grade biology, 87% of our students were meeting or exceeding, so that was down 1% from the previous year. The average scaled score went down 2 points from the previous year. So slight decreases, but nothing in talking to our high school science department head that we are concerned about. So our successes, obviously, our students continue to exceed state performance by wide margins. Our 10th grade ELA median exceeding percentage was the highest in the state and has now exceeded our pre-COVID numbers. So again, huge props to our ELA students. And we also saw a lot of growth in some of our subgroups. So in our special education students, or students with disabilities, we saw high growth. The average ELA SGP went up 28 points. The average math SGP went up 18 points. For our low-income students, the percentage of students that were meeting and exceeding went up 13%. You can see SGPs went up for our low-income students, similar for our high-need students, and for our Black and African American students, their ELA and their biology percentages that were meeting and exceeding went up 43%, and in math went up 37%. So at the high school, we saw a lot of growth within our subgroups.
What's the difference between a high needs student and a special education student? I just don't know the difference.
So high needs is a much broader category. So high needs students are students with disabilities, our low income students, our multilingual students. It's a broader category, and that's more specifically students with disability, students who are on IEPs.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Our focus areas. So our high needs students continue to do better than the state average, but again, as I was just noting, within DSHS, we want to continue to close that gap between how they're doing and how their other peers who are not part of these groups are doing. Departments will now go and they'll analyze each item and look at specific areas. So for example, within our great results, math did see a dip in statistics and probability, science saw a dip in ecology. So now the teachers are going to go and they're going to look at the specific questions and say, was the question just worded weirdly and our students, didn't do as well as the year before, or is there something in the way that we teach that needs to change for the year? So they'll go into that kind of more micro level and look at each question. Obviously, like I just mentioned, these are similar to what we discussed for the middle school. Our K through 12 district data team to continue to analyze these vertical trends. We've talked a little bit about our co-taught classes at the high school, which are continuing to support a lot of our high needs students, some of our small group students, and continuing knowing that the SEL piece is connected to how students do academically, and making sure that all of our students have a trusted adult in the building that they can go to and they can approach, whether it's academic help or other kind of help or guidance that they need. When we look at the high school's accountability, you can see that we were at 95%, so we were either meeting or exceeding targets. So that's the highest category you can get in DESE. They don't have it just flat out exceeding targets. So last year we were at 96%, and you can see our percentile, 99%. So we're in the 99th percentile, so the high school doing very well. And then to kind of round out all of the numbers that are getting thrown at you tonight, AP scores. So this shows a 5-year glance back at our AP scores. So I think what's notable about our AP scores is if you look throughout the years, we have more students who are taking AP tests. We have more students taking more exams, but they're doing just as well. So despite, we're opening access and trying to get more students in AP classes. So expanding AP classes, it's not like we've seen any changes in how students are doing. We're still at 96% of our students at scores of 3 or above. 83% of all of our students scored a 4 or higher, and 46% of our students scored a 5 or higher. Again, 77% of our students before they graduate will take in at least one AP course at the high school. So that's some data on AP scores.
Quick question on APs. Is it still true that you can sit for an AP exam without taking the AP class? Do we have stats on how many kids are doing that?
Yep. So Yeah, there are classes. So we offer like a psychology elective, but we don't offer AP psychology. So every year there's like 6 or 7 students that will opt to sit for the AP psychology exam. So all those numbers are factored into this.
Thanks.
And then our SAT and our ACT scores, again, they're equally as strong. Our ACT scores all went up slightly from 2024 to 2025. And then you can see the changes over the 5-year period for the SAT scores. So that is it, everyone.
Neat that Dawn was the only person who loved numbers.
Anybody with any more questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good results.
And thank you to the teachers.
Yeah.
Whatever they're doing is definitely working. So I appreciate that. So next, I guess, are you finished with your comments? Is that all?
Yes, yeah. Happy to take other general questions too. I didn't offer that before we dove into data.
Oh, personally, I've seen the trajectory change in 24 months of just things in general. So I think it's great. Positive comment, like teachers engagement. So,
Great.
yeah.
Thank you.
I think Parent Square helps too
I do
a lot
Yeah.
for convenience for teachers.
Good. Thank you for that feedback.
All right, with that, Dawn, more numbers. We're going to move to your financial reports.
I have a very short report because everything's going well this year. So you have your monthly approved warrant report, and I thank Jeff for being your signer. This is your first glimpse as to where we are in fiscal year 26. We'll have a month or two to live in 26 before I start throwing out the 27 budget. So enjoy 26. But I will say it's an opportunity to look at your revenue and sort of see where we are. The state's obviously budget is finalized in July, so when we did our budget in March, we were using the governor's budget. So we did see an increase in our Chapter 70, and that was because the minimum per pupil went up. That actually those districts that's the only increase they see are able to take advantage of. Factored in that too a little bit is a change in our school choice. So that 66 would have been a little bit higher, but our school, we must have more students going to virtual schools or other schools. So that number went up a little bit. Transportation right now, that's what the cherry sheet says, but I will tell you what really matters is the end of the year report and then what they decide if the reimbursement is. So we'll have more insight in that when we get our first payment, which is not until like January. So it was the final state budget was really in line with the governor's budget as far as transportation reimbursement. And as you know, we're still being conservative with our bank interest. We will continue probably to see an positive operating variance there. But then those variances, keep in mind, are what we will use to help offset the fiscal year 27 budget for use of E&D. So it's nice to have that, so that we have that opportunity to help offset the budget. But that way the towns are taking advantage of those dollars. We're just delaying the year until we have a clearer picture of what it's going to look like. So the revenue side looks good. Obviously, all the other activities, it's early in the year, so we are assuming that we will meet budget on those, but as we progress during the school year, we will refine those projections as necessary. I think that looking at the status of appropriations, where we can really get a good glimpse of where we are right now is that we have every school year employee now on payroll. That's all encumbered, so you can see that we're within 1% of our budget, knowing that those balances that are left are going to cover substitutes, custodial overtime, and there's still some athletic coaches that aren't encumbered. I did say in my report that we do have numerous leaves on the horizon, so my expectation is that our substitute line item will go over budget this year, and but that just ebbs and flows based on what's happening with our staff. But I can tell you now that we have enough upcoming leaves that I anticipate that we will see a negative when it comes to closer to the end of the year for substitutes. Although you see 72,000 right now, my guess is that will get absorbed. On the expenditure side, it's still early. So we have encumbered transportation. We haven't done utilities or healthcare yet. I'll make sure those are done before we present the budget in December. but we're not foreseeing any. You see a couple little red things, but that's small dollars when you compare it to our total budget. So that's where we sit with fiscal year 26. We're working hard on all the steps that we need to do for fiscal year 25. We'll be filing our end of the year report tomorrow, which is a huge milestone for us. Our audit won't start until February, but then it's a sort of a quick window. We find it's better just to go ahead and do it in a quick window. We have to wait for certain reports from other entities before we can finalize our audit. So we've gone onto that schedule, which works well. And we did, our treasurer did file our E&D certification paperwork. So it's sitting with the DOR until they have some free time. We're secondary to their work schedule because they've got to do all the tax rates. So when they have an opening, our file is sitting there. But I put in your report when we're anticipating for it to be certified. There's some adjustments they make. But the good news is that we had hoped to end the year with E&D that was more within the range of school committee policy, which was 3 to 4, and we're over the 3% now. Remember last year we were below 3, and we hesitated to make that $75,000 transfer to unemployment if it was going to cause us not to be. So we were able to do the $75,000 transfer to the unemployment fund and still get above 3% on E&D. So I don't foresee, as you can see how our budget is going right now, that we're going to see a huge increase in E&D. So I think we have lost a little bit of flexibility on how we can use E&D for capital and such. But I think that is to the desire of our town members. So we will move along with that and try to keep in the 3 to 4% because we, as a regional school committee, we do need to have that safety net in case something happens. But all in all, I think on the financial side, we look pretty good.
Thank you, Dawn. Any questions for Dawn? The numbers always astound me. You do them quickly. So now we have discussion items, which I'm assuming is this.
It'll be just the action item. Of
Yeah,
the
the action, because there was
no discussion.
No discussion. Okay, so because I was assuming maybe that was the discussion was this action item. So this
Give an update.
Yeah, the update for, if you all remember, we discussed this the first read, so now this is the second read, and you all made some adjustments to it.
Yes. And just to clarify, we had this conversation at the joint meeting with the 2 elementary schools, and in digging deep into the policy manual, which I know Angie knows by heart, this is actually just a regional vote because it is it's graduation related. So the elementaries will not be voting on this. So if you pass it tonight, it's done and it goes off to the state. So just a reminder, there's a difference between the competency determination, which is what the state says our graduates need to do in order to graduate from high school. And then there's the Dover-Sherborn requirements, which is 4 years of English, 4 years of math, et cetera, et cetera. We are just tonight talking about the state requirements, which used to be that our students had to pass the English, the math, and the science MCAS in high school in order to graduate. That came, the ballot, the voters decided that was not going to be the case anymore. And so for some reason, the state has put it on districts to decide what the state determination is. So here we are. We discussed this at the joint meeting. And in your packet, you'll see the chart that has some redlining in it. This is the same chart you saw last time with some updates. And this is all moving quickly. I think that when the vote went on the ballot, I don't think there was a lot of forethought into what if the voters turned down MCAS. And so when that came out, it was a bit of a surprise, I think, to some of our leaders. And there was no plan in place. And so we were thrust into making a plan pretty quickly. Luckily, our current juniors and current seniors are already ready to graduate. So this is kind of something that won't affect us for a few years. So we have some time, but the state is still requiring us to upload this ASAP. So when we initially showed this to you, we said, yes, according to the state, our students have to complete coursework, which means they sit through the course for a full year and they get full credit for the course. And that's English 1 and English 2. That's Algebra 1 and Geometry. That's one science, and that science can be biology, chemistry, physics, or engineering, and U.S. history. So they have to sit through the course and get credit for the course. What we had proposed a month ago was that in order to show mastery, they either had to pass the final exam or complete a portfolio or do something else at the administration's requirement if there's extenuating circumstances. In talking with all of the other superintendents in the state and with talking about it back here with the leadership team, What we've come to realize is that by expecting students to pass the final exam in a course is putting more pressure on them than the MCAS did, and it's putting pressure on them to pass one test, and they have to pass it with a certain grade. Whereas if you take and say, the students have 10 months to cover all of the state frameworks. Over those 10 months, they're going to be taking multiple quizzes, multiple tests, multiple projects. We don't want them all to be paper and pencil tests either. We want all kinds of assessments. So why wouldn't we measure their learning over the course of the year versus in one high-stakes final exam? And so all of the superintendents have moved towards proposing to their school committees, or many of them, that instead of that one single test as showing mastery, that the students show mastery throughout the year. So that's what Denny and I are proposing to you tonight as an update to your first read that you consider, with the support, obviously, of the high school administration and staff behind us. It's also in line with challenge success, that we shouldn't be hanging our hats on one single assessment. So that's where we stand. And then you see I translated it into the document that Angie and the policy subcommittee would need to put into our policy manual, which will be IKFE. So there's the chart, which is easy to read, and then it's translated.
Yeah. I mean, I appreciate this because I'm a recovering lawyer, and so my grade at each semester was one test, and it was usually sometimes one question. So if you flubbed, or if the professor did not agree with that, that was it. Mm-hmm. Flunked that entire course when we've done stuff all semester.
How has that requirement impacted our students? Are they often having to retake final exam, or what are the options there?
So it hasn't been a requirement. That's what we initially proposed a month ago would be the requirement moving forward, and giving ourselves a little bit of grace and time to process it, even though the state's in a rush. We said that doesn't make any sense. So we haven't implemented anything yet.
Anybody have a question? I mean, because I'm glad you went out to other superintendents to see and to kind of bounce the idea off of what is going to be what they perceive, because it is a no man's land, because they're kind of like, okay, now we don't have this, so now figure it out. It's a lot.
And I think that, to be honest, I think this is temporary, because I think the state already has plans on kind of their own competency determinations being determined again, and we're just in a holding pattern.
Yeah.
But that's until 2027.
Right.
Which is
But you can
very
see
helpful.
all the pieces coming into place.
Right.
Yeah.
So did everyone have a chance to read the draft? I'm glad that you paralleled it with the graph or the table so that they can see these strike-throughs. As a policy committee person, you see those all the time and you realize what you're interchanging out. I mean, I think the requirements, I feel like our students are well prepared through our school. I don't think that this is impactful one way or the other, because I just feel like we kind of do what we have been doing, and the results show that they're learning.
Was this discussed with the teachers, or is this, what was their feedback? What are their...
Well, we kind of relied on the principal and the assistant principal to work with their teachers, and then they said that they were in favor of this. Again, this is the state requirement. Our DS graduation requirements are way up here relative, and so that's kind of where they have a stronger opinion. This is like the minimum of where our freshmen and sophomores land, and then we add on to that.
And is it important to have the state in policy here so that if someone transfers out, they take that with them, or how would that work?
So, do you want to speak to that, transferring students?
Yep. It's more important for students that might be transferring in from another state.
Okay.
Whereas in the past, whereas the MCAS requirement, they had to quickly sit for the MCAS and pass it. Mm-hmm. Whereas in this case, it gives schools more of the ability to examine their transcript and to see which of their previous coursework matches up with a DS course, and then to make that decision as to whether that count as the requirement for algebra or for English 1.
Okay. Toa?
Yeah, I really think this is a great idea to do it this way. I really like it, because all through my life I've gone through a system where there is one final exam, and if you pass it, you pass it, you fail it, you fail it. And I know from experience that, you waste an immense amount of time studying for that exam, and that information that you gather to do well in the exam goes out of your system equally fast. So I think So I think it's really important. I am learning from my son how Mr. Bridger teaches his class, that everything is experimental and takes equal amount of time. The kids really learn it that way, and I really love that we are going to be proposing this.
Well said, Toa.
Yeah, we're aiming for that enduring understanding versus that take the test and then
Yes.
not remember it in September. Yeah.
Exactly. Thank you. So now do we just need to vote
Yeah.
as a committee? So we'll do this as a roll call because we have Toa remote. So when I call for your vote, just say your name and yea or nay. So I guess what we need is first we need a motion to adopt the Massachusetts competency determination. Is that because this is for the state?
Yeah, Dover-Sherborn's version of it.
Dover-Sherborn's version of the Massachusetts competency determination that we will submit to the state and will go into our policy manual. Do I have a motion?
I move.
Jeff, do I have a second? I'll go with Mary. Mary, I saw you first and I'm going to work on some other things policy-wise. So with that being said, I'll start with Toa.
Yes.
Kevin?
Yes, I approve.
Jeff?
Yes.
Angie Johnson, yes. Mary?
Mary Louder, yes.
And Lindsay?
Yes.
All right, so it is unanimous. So we can put this in our policy manual because it's not thick enough yet. Let me tell
Do
you.
the PDF.
Thank you. Yeah, we have a meeting Friday, right, Toa? There's a meeting Friday for policy, so we'll put that in there. I'll send that to her tomorrow if you get it to me. I can send it to our MESC policy person. Okay, so that is our only action item that I have listed. So now we have some consent items, and we can vote on these all as one. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So if you go in your packet to the consent items, there are 4. One is the approval of the middle school field trip, which is done yearly. You can read it. It tells the cost and kind of the parameters on it. One is the approval of our regional school committee minutes. If there are any corrections that you saw, I didn't see any, but I read it kind of quickly. And the approval of the FY26 grants. If you have any questions about that, Dawn would be the point person on that. If you saw, I read through it. There's a lot, it seems like, for our special ed grants and things like
The
that.
annual grants.
Yeah, the annual grants. And then the accept the gift of the new signs. If you see them over by the auditorium/cafeteria area, which I love them because it does kind of give you a lay of the land. It can get a little confusing. And it was an Eagle Scout project. Mm-hmm. And so that was donated. But in order to thank the correct persons, or people who did that, it was Jacob Popeil as part of his Eagle Scout project. So we want to thank Jacob and adopt that as well. So do I have a motion to approve all 4 consent items, being the signs, the Washington, D.C. trip, the grants, and the minutes from the last meeting?
I move to approve the consent items.
Second? Kevin? Second? All right. So we'll start with Toa.
Yes.
Kevin?
Come, yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Angie Johnson, yes. Mary?
Mary Louder, yes.
And Lindsay?
Yes.
All right. So I think that wraps up our main voting part of anything we need. So with that being said, our next meeting is November 4th. And the subcommittees you're on, so the way to go about that is you can contact, there should be a point person on the sheet. If there's not, contact myself, or you can ask Diane in the office. She also has the list. And just contact the organization or the point person and see when their meetings are, or if you need to attend the meetings in person or anything that they may need. And that way you can make sure you're on the ball for those. A lot of these really only meet virtually or, through, because I know facilities with Dawn will call and say, you need to come and do a walkthrough on something because I'm on that with her. So that's all it is. So it's very much at the discretion of the organization you're in. So just keep up with those, and we're filling in some more spots, and we'll be done with that. And thank you for the negotiations team who's already started. I appreciate that from both of you very much. And policy will start on Friday. So any policy questions, you all can start sending them in. With that being said, do I have a motion to adjourn at 7:35?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
Toa?
Yes.
Kevin?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Angie? Yes. Mary?
Yes.
And Lindsay?
Yes.
All right, we're adjourned.